Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Go ahead. You're good.
Welcome to Startup Grind.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Well, we're excited to have you. Tell us, talk about a range of things. Just tell us what Techstars is, if you would.
Sure. Yeah. So Techstars really is a mentorship-driven accelerator model. So it's about getting a whole community behind just 10 or so startups at once. We do that once a year in about a dozen places, mostly in the U.S. And we've now funded about 350 companies, and got some amazing companies in the portfolio. It's just a blast to be around these energetic entrepreneurs, around a whole community of mentors, and it's an amazing thing to have a whole city behind a group of 10 companies.
Yeah.
And we've replicated that and seen that.
And does that happen in? I mean, Boulder we're going to talk about, but does that happen in the other 6 cities? Does everyone? Is it implicit that the community around you gets involved, or you won't do it there?
Well, so when we started, I'm from Boulder, which is, for those of you who don't know Boulder, it's 100,000 people. It's near Denver. It's a small hippie town. You might have read that you can smoke pot there now, so that's kind of cool. It attracts a lot of people. Football team doesn't always win, but it's good otherwise. We didn't know if the sort of give first nature of Boulder would translate to places like New York City, or Boston, and have been actually blown away that it translates in an even more powerful way. A lot of these places had never experienced a mechanism that really created a focal point for early stage activity in their community. They just had all these disparate activities and events, which are great. I mean, it's awesome to go to an event and get an award and be able to present your startup or whatever. But when you have like the whole town focused on you, something magic really happens.
Yeah. How did it start? Where did it come from? Tell us about some of the first meetings you had about it.
Sure. So there's this guy named Brad Feld.
We've heard of him.
He
was on the. He wasn't here last year, but it was like 1984. He was Skyped in from Miami.
That's weird.
Last year it was weird. Yeah.
He does that. He decided that for like a full year he wasn't going to travel.
Okay.
So that's probably why he did that.
Yeah.
He can do that because he's an amazing investor, and people are like, whatever, do it by Skype. But I'd never met Brad. I was an angel investor. I'd done a few of my own startups that kind of went 2 and 1 and started angel investing and kind of thought it sucked, and came up with this idea for surrounding the community around these companies and giving them a little capital and spending time with them. And I pitched it to Brad in what I think was a 10-minute meeting. It took me 3 months to get on his calendar. And Brad sort of embodied that idea that, we'll meet with anybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, crazy things can happen. So in walked the crazy thing. I told him about this idea for Techstars and that I was putting up a little bit of money, and I wanted him to invest and get involved. And in the 10-minute meeting, he said, I'm in. I'm investing.
Wow.
As long as you're not, you don't prove to be an idiot. So we had to do some stuff with you to make sure that.
And had anyone else invested, or was he kind of that initial person?
He was the second guy, and then my co-founder from a couple of businesses, David Brown and Jared Polis, who is a fantastic entrepreneur there. It was just the 4 of us, sort of as an experiment that first year. We ran the whole thing on $200,000 that first year.
Wow.
Just really light, and it magic happened, and ever since it's just been building.
What are you? What are you most proud of about Techstars? What piece of it, are you most?
So, obviously the companies. I mean, the companies that have come out of it, and the sort of triumphs that they have. There's this moment, we make all these videos, and there's this one moment when I remember seeing myself watching. I think it was just a practice for a demo day or something, and the alumni who had been through the program were coming back to coach the companies that were about to present their businesses for the first time. And that sort of sustained culture of giving first and of mentorship really made me proud in that moment to just see how, if you now go through Techstars, there's companies that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 years ahead of you. And they all come back. And they all say, here's what you're about to go through, and here's what you might experience. And that network and the build of it is really exciting.
It's really cool. Talk about your community values. Talk about what makes the Techstars community special.
So, we operate in all these different places, but kind of have the same, general mantras. I mean, one that you know about is give first, right? It's the idea that you give before you get. And so, like Brad in that first meeting, with me, just take a meeting and be open to ideas. Help an entrepreneur because it's the right thing to do. One of the things we spun out early because of that value is something called the Global Accelerator Network. So in 2011, the White House launched something called Startup America. Some of you might remember. We just gave away our model, and we said, if you want to use the Techstars model, we documented the heck out of it, right? And said, just go ahead and do it.
Open source.
Yeah, and people say, why would you do that? You're creating competitors. And that always produces unexpected results when you give first. It's a secret weapon of the best entrepreneurial communities. And in this case, what happened was two of those organizations, London and Chicago, we actually acquired into the Techstars system after they showed us that they were great. So that's one of the big values. I think the sort of open door attitude, right? Anybody will take a meeting, anybody will try to help you. I think these are secret weapons of the best communities.
And if I could just share an experience, the first time I met you, coincidentally, was at a launch conference, and Jason's backstage coming in here in a minute. And I emailed you and said, hey, we want to do Startup Grind in Denver, Boulder. And you don't know me. I mean, I'm not anybody. But you immediately just connected me to the founder of SendGrid. It's this amazing company that's raised tens of millions of dollars, and kind of said, hey, we'll have this give first. Brad Feld, the first time I ever had an interaction with him was 4 years ago at office hours, where I scheduled 15 minutes, random person, where he spent time with me. Yeah. It's very genuine, and I think you guys are kind of, in some ways, a little, you're workers. You just kind of put your shoulder down and work and live it, and I think, I don't know how many people know about it. This is why part of why we're excited to have you, so people can learn more about it.
Yeah, well, I think that the Bay Area, the Valley, is good at that. I mean, that sort of idea that, it's a community, and you have to sort of help each other. It's gotten so big that it sort of gets lost, but I think that's the roots of it. And in a place like Boulder, we really sort of live that every day. And I think you get so much opportunity from just being responsive and serendipity and things that randomly happen to you, that if you're not open to it, you're screwed, right? So, I'm amazed that people don't answer their email. I don't think it's amazing that we do. I think it's amazing that people don't. By the way, I'm David at Techstars.com.
Can we just clap for that real quick? Because I think that's a good insight.
There's like gold in there, right? Like, I mean, and anybody that has anything that I can help them with, just email me, David at Techstars.com. It's not that much.
Like literally, are people mailing you Bitcoins, or what do you mean by gold?
Well, I got my whole mining operation going on back here. I hope so. That would be nice.
Yeah, that would be nice. How to get a meeting with David Cohen? Send him 1 Bitcoin. Where do your founders fall into? You've got like YC. It's like Ivy League. I know Jessica wouldn't like me saying this. She's going to be here later. But it's really an Ivy League focused entrepreneur hacker. And you've got Dave McClure, who's here this morning, who is really like the ultimate hustler. And I wonder, like, do your entrepreneurs, do they fall somewhere in between there? Do you who are these people? Most of them are they engineers? Are they?
Yeah, I think our belief around Techstars, and it's played out in almost every company I've been around that's been successful. The one thing I've learned is there's no hard and fast rule, but we look for tech-heavy teams. We actually like the balance. So 2 engineers, 1 person focused on the business seems to be a magical combination. Could be 2 engineers, because it's these days pretty easy to go out and find an experienced business person who joins a really interesting company. But like everywhere, we're seeing that the investors are the developers. Right? I mean, they're the ones that are deciding which companies are going to get created and funded by where they put their energy.
Yeah.
And so, they're in control right now. I think in 10 years, it'll be the designers, by the way, as we get more automated with, developing technology. But I think design is going to be super valued the way that engineering is today in 10 years. But, tech heavy, but with some balance is the formula that I've seen work the best.
Which companies within the Techstars program do you guys point to as your kind of temple, hero companies? Who do your companies look up to?
I mean, there's so many. You know, I think we have like 30.
Who are your favorite
I think
children?
we have like 35 companies that are 25 million and above in value, right? So
How many did you say? 35?
about 35, and I think we've now had 30 acquisitions. I'd say 20 of them have been sort of meaningful, and then some acquihires, of course. But you know, I mean, you mentioned SendGrid, obviously. You know, they're sort of the gold standard, I think, today in the transactional email space.
Yeah.
Very fast-growing company. You've got companies like Robotics that make the sort of gaming platforms, you know. But there's so many. I mean, just Contently in New York doing content management, growing really fast. Localytics, I just read the other day, raised another 16 million in Boston. So you know, there are dozens of companies
it's a nice
that.
post to read.
Yeah. Yes, I didn't know about it.
Right.
I just read it.
It's like, oh, cool.
I knew about it.
You did know about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I heard about it. But you know, I'm also really proud of the ones that, you know, nobody's ever heard of,
Yeah.
right? That are making $2-3 million a year and growing. You know, these things take time, and you know, we've had amazing pivots. We had amazing, you know, build in the portfolio, and now with 350 companies, I think, you know, the portfolio is worth a few $1 billion.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really over time. It's amazing how it builds.
The hashtag is Startup Grind. You've obviously had incredible success. I have been hearing that you all are raising a new fund. You probably can't talk about it, but or you can maybe, or can you talk about it?
So raise your hand if you're raising a venture fund, because I mean, I'm reading about like literally 20 today, I think I read about. But yes, we're in that group. You know, all I can really point to is the filing that we did.
Yeah.
And so we're in the middle of that, so I'm not supposed to talk too much about it. But there's a lot of opportunity around Techstars, and I think the you know, broader investment community institutions are seeing that opportunity.
Great. And talk to us a little bit about, you guys have a huge focus on mentoring, and I think you have a really good perspective on this. How do you pair your mentors with your startups? We hear some people talk about where it's kind of this, it's almost like some sort of long-term relationship where you can't really force certain mentors. How do you all kind of get the right people with the right people?
Yeah, so we're huge believers that you can't force it. It's got to be a mutual falling in love process. And so we create a lot of exposure in the first month. It's not, you know, people think of Techstars and they think of like, it's like school, but it's actually not at all like that. There's no real curriculum and there's no set pattern.
Yeah.
It's for each company. So, you know, if you're in the program and what you need is help with pricing or go-to-market strategy, you know, we're going to surround you with a bunch of people like that. And some are going to stick and some are not. You end up in Techstars having typically 3 to 6 lead mentors who are sort of at another level of commitment with your company. So each company ends up with real focus. That's really what's different about what we do, is that it's not, you know, from on high, you know, you're getting this advice and you have a dinner and people say amazing things. It's that you have this, you know, community of people that are actually in there working with the business, working with you on the business.
Yeah.
Right. And so that expertise is dependent on what you need, and it's got to be, you know, bidirectional. It's got to be that you fell in love in both ways.
What makes for a great mentor? Who is it? You know, what are the characteristics of someone?
So I wrote a post called Mentor Manifesto about this, and I think, you know, really the biggest thing is that it's an approach of asking questions, right? I mean, many of us have had mentors in our lives that have said, you know, this is how you do this. This is the one and only right way.
Yeah.
And that's a huge red flag to me, and we monitor for it closely. What you're looking for is challenge and the right questions and this sort of Socratic approach.
Yeah.
And so the best mentors do that, and they don't have to be right. You know, the reason people say, well, why do people mentor around Techstars? What do they get out of it? You know, are they getting some equity or something? No, they're giving first, but what they get out of it is they learn. And so, you know, recognize that that's where they're coming from. And, you know, when they're giving you advice, they may or may not be giving you good advice, but based on what you then do with it and the closing the loop and coming back to them, they'll learn from that, and their own businesses will get better and their pattern matching will get better.
How have you gotten such amazing people on there? You've got Fred Wilson, you've got Dick Costello, you've got, obviously, you talked about Redfield, Jeff Clavier was here yesterday. And in the context of entrepreneurs looking for their own mentors, trying to build their own mentor network for their career, you know, where do you start? How do you get people, you know, that are that are going to give you the right advice you need? How do you get them on board?
Yeah, so take them separately. I mean, the original build of the network of mentors was really just people that we knew, that we had worked with, that had that give first kind of attitude. That, Jeff that you mentioned, Jeff doesn't invest everywhere, but he likes to invest in Boulder and New York and here, right? And so it was an obvious match, for Jeff to come. He's been coming since 2007.
Wow.
And he just, at first came not looking for investments, but just trying to be helpful to the build of a new community, right? And that is one of the nice things about what we do is, if you're someone like Jeff, you get to come and plug in to that New York or that Boulder community in a very effective way and create new social relationships when you come and mentor. So that's part of what the attraction has been. I think also just having good companies, that always helps. The second question, people say to me all the time, I can't get anyone to, be my mentor, or, I can't get help from people. And I think you're probably just doing it wrong, because there's so many people that are willing to help. And the challenge is everybody goes after Fred Wilson.
Sure.
And everybody goes after Brad, and there's just physically not enough time. My advice is always look for somebody that you admire that's built a company in your space or an adjacent space, and just, think of it as a long-term relationship, right? You don't have to go right for that lunch meeting, right? You can go for a quick email exchange, love a piece of feedback on my product, and sort of build a relationship that way. So keep the first interactions really light and easy. And as you build interest with people, then I think you get together and do the meetings and coffees and those things.
Our hashtag is Startup Grind. I don't think, until today, I had never heard this story, and I'd love for you to tell it. You are one of the original investors of Uber, and really played kind of an interesting role at the very earliest stage. I wonder if you could tell that story about how you got to meet their founder. I got to meet Ryan.
Sure. So Ryan Graves was sort of the first guy really running the business, right? I mean, Travis, Garrett weren't active in the business. It's sort of their thing. And Ryan was actually relocating. I can't remember where on the East Coast, but he was driving out here to sort of, after his Twitter exchange with them, to sort of be the original operator of the company. And he ended up in Boulder on his way. And he was attracted to Techstars, right? Like, I heard you're doing this thing, and we had him meet some companies and, had a beer, and, they only raised $1.5 million in that first round, if I remember correctly. It was a small amount of money. And, the pitch to get into that deal, from my perspective, was Techstars, which is not, hey, you have to move here and go through it, but rather, there's an opportunity for you. We have these demo day events. There's 500 to 1,000 investors showing up for all of them. High net worth people, venture capitalists, sort of who's who in the startup community. Let's do some rides around those events, right? And just was lucky enough to be, meeting him at the right moment and excited about what they were doing, and, the rest is history.
What, 2014, what are you all looking at? What is the focus over the next year? What do you want to accomplish, and what are you doing?
So we built this really magical thing that works in a location, right? So we do that. You mentioned the 7 cities we're in, Chicago, New York, Boston, Austin, Texas, Boulder, London, Seattle, right? We have direct operations in those locations. And we've gotten really good at that. They produce great results. A lot of people are interested in it and getting involved in the companies. Very, very high interest. So that's awesome. We have this new thing that we're doing, which is sort of working with big companies. For example, we run a program that's exactly the same for Nike around digital sport. We run a program that's exactly the same for EdTech with Kaplan, financial technology with Barclays, and so on. We have several of those. That's really our growth right now. It's a magical combination because you get all of the normal Techstars stuff, plus you get the help from that big company that's in the space you're in without them having to be an investor in your company or having options in your company. So that's a new thing that we're growing. I think now we're really good at doing, there's 12 of those happening around the country and the world every year, 12 programs. So about 120, 140 or so companies a year. Got real scale on it. What we suck at, and we're trying to get a lot better at, is the interconnectedness of that network. So in London or in Boston or in New York, it's phenomenal, and it's a huge unfair advantage for the companies that are in those programs. but we don't leverage that across, the water to London. The New York folks aren't helping the London folks. So we're really focused on how do we get more leverage across the system. And really, the product of Techstars is not an accelerator, it's the network, right? That's the thing that people sort of undervalue that can really change a business. And so we're trying to build that linkage across the system.
Well, your community is, and as you describe your values, I mean, it is the differentiator. It's, there are so many accelerators around the world. Yep. You've got smart people at the top. There are others that have smart people, but they don't have the community that you have. We're going to take questions in just a second too, so be ready for those. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would just mention, I was talking to somebody in the green room about was this global accelerator network, that I mentioned earlier. So there are now, I don't know, I think there's literally an accelerator launching every day. Yeah. And people ask me all the time, like, are they going away yet? The problem is they're not going to go away anytime soon because they're super cheap.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's okay, right? Because the definition of an accelerator and a mentorship-driven accelerator is that people are helping the companies and they're investing. And when you have those two things, I think it's okay. Even if it doesn't work economically, it's additive in a community and it's teaching entrepreneurs and connecting them to the previous generation that can help them. It's putting capital into their ideas. Even if they all fail, the community rises a little bit, right? And so I don't think people should look at that as a bad thing. Not all of them, in fact, most of them will not work economically, but that doesn't mean they're going to die. A lot of people, with plenty of money and a lot of drive to make their communities better will sustain these things for 10 or 20 years or more.
That's a good take. Any question here right in the front? Mike, do we have a mic? Go ahead.
Do you guys take only startups in a particular stage of their company, or is it any stage?
Yeah, so I think that the top accelerator programs have seen a real market shift in that mix. Certainly in 2007 when we started, it was a couple of people and a dog and an idea maybe.
Like literally you had a dog there?
Yeah, usually they had a dog, yeah. Not always.
It's a lot of companies that started with dogs.
Yeah,
not the, you know what I mean, the animals.
Yeah, the idea is optional, but you're saying the dog.
No, I'm not saying you're a dog, you know what I'm saying.
I got it.
Just,
but that's really changed. So we're very commonly now, if you look at a 10-company class, that we're sort of funding going into Techstars now, 5 or 6 of them will have raised $500,000, $1 million bucks. Several of them will be in multi-millions revenue. It's just so competitive, right? We're at 1% selection rate now. Now, I actually view all of those as basically the same. They're all just pure startups, right? A couple million in revenue, you're trying to build something big it's a head start, but fundamentally you're at the starting line. So we are seeing the mix change. We've had now a dozen companies founded by our own mentors that have gone through the program. So the mix is getting a little older by age of the people we're funding. It's sort of going up, one year per year. Somewhere in the mid-30s now is our average age of funded founder. Used to be like 27, 28. And we're seeing more progress, but not afraid at all to work on something that is at the starting line with no progress. So it's a mix today.
Next question right here. Hustle Chris right here.
Here, I got you.
He's got a mic right there. Just stand up and go ahead.
Is Boulder unique, or are there other towns in similar size to Boulder that could develop startup communities like Boulder? And if so, what are the characteristics they need?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm super passionate about, and I'm a huge believer in, is that there will be 50 great startup communities in our lifetimes for most of us. So, we want to be a part of helping make that happen. Today people say, well, you got to be in 1 or 2 places. 10 years ago, they used to say, you can't do a startup in Boulder, Colorado, like on the internet. That's crazy. They'd laugh at you. 100,000 people. Where's the support mechanism? Do you guys even have internet there?
Selling all the drugs there, you must have the internet.
You got one university, right? Now when I tell people, you're doing a startup in Boulder, nobody laughs anymore. Oh, right, I've heard of companies from there. I've heard of investors that are there. it's obviously a much smaller community, but it's super vibrant. In fact, we think it's the most entrepreneurial dense city in the world, right? By population of who's working in or on a startup. And that's just amazing to see. It's number 4 in venture capital in America. I mean, 10 years ago, it wasn't even in the top 30, right? So things change fast. I do believe there are many places that will rise like that around the world, and I think that's a good thing. This is a special place, and this isn't the aspiration of a place like Boulder to be like this. It's not going to be like this. It's just not. It's different, but it can be the best Boulder it can be. And so the communities that are rising like that are the ones that think about it that way, have this sustained culture of giving back and giving first and mentoring, right? And the pot doesn't hurt. So.
Well, I think too. I mean, to that, can I just add something to that? Is that you look once you look into these cities, you see that they have their successes, right? Whether it's DC with Rosetta Stone or Capital One, or I mean, if you just start looking, then you realize that there are or Millennial Media in Baltimore. I mean, there are temp-hole unicorns type companies in cities basically everywhere.
I love sometimes you come here and you get in a fight, right? Luckily that's not happening today, but you get in a fight because people say yeah, you got to be here, right? And I just reject that idea, and if you believe that, you're ignoring easily available evidence.
That's right.
To the contrary. Now there's a ton of interesting stuff here, right? I'm making a living right now investing in everywhere else. I invest here too, right? But I've got a system to help find interesting things in other great places. And it may not have the volume, those places, but there are places that are rising, like you mentioned. And if you do look, you see the activity.
You said that there would someday be 50 great startup cities. How many do you think there are today?
Well, people.
I'm not going to say, you don't have to say who they are, but I mean, how close are we on that?
Well, so 10 years ago, people would have said, there's Boston and there's
the Valley,
the Bay Area, right? And today, depending on your point of view, you can say there's one, right? And so define great, right? I think there are 10 or 12 places in the U.S. that have very vibrant, startup communities that work amazingly well.
Yeah.
And I think it's growing fast, right? So to get to 50, I think we're 10 to 20 years out.
Great. Let's do one more question, and then we'll finish. Get you right there.
So do you still see opportunities for new incubators to be started? And if so, in what kind of area? Is it geographic regions, or do you think that there could be new incubators focusing on helping minorities or women? And if you think that model will be successful helping those types of entrepreneurs?
Yep. Sure. I mean, they're still starting up every day, and I think there are still a few places in the world, right, that have a population of some sort that don't have an accelerator. So, those are opportunities. And when you talk about the verticalized one, I think that's smart, right? I mean, we're doing that. I mentioned like Kaplan and EdTech in New York. It can be a good combination. You've got to make sure it's right for the entrepreneurs, and that's how we think about it. Kaplan could have said, we're going to take a bunch of equity and not give first, and we wouldn't want to do it with them. Instead, they've said, let's just be around the flow, and I think there's corporate opportunities like that. I think verticalization makes a lot of sense because you can get a set of mentors, but when you restrict it to a small geography and a vertical space, it's pretty hard to attract people there. And when you talk about, my personal view on sort of, incubator, accelerator for women or for minorities is I'm not a huge fan of that activity. I would rather celebrate the heroes that, are in the best programs, whatever they are, rather than creating a special context for them. That said, I support a lot of things like that. So, I would rather see it, us all pointing to the women that are amazing, that are, in a Y Combinator or Techstars or 500 or whatever, rather than creating some other special context for them. And we all have to do better with all of that, obviously.
Let's give Dave a big round of applause. Thanks for being here. Thank you very much.